In any sovereign country in the world, the image of a head of state being handcuffed and escorted by foreign forces onto a military aircraft is usually regarded as the ultimate humiliation of national dignity. Such a moment typically provokes public outrage, prompts the military to declare a state of war, and ignites national pride at its fiercest in defense of the leader. But in Venezuela, in the early hours of January 5, 2026, every familiar rule of politics and collective psychology was turned completely upside down. That night, Caracas did not sleep, not because of air raid sirens or the roar of fighter jets tearing through the sky, but because of music, fireworks, and deafening cheers echoing from narrow alleyways to grand boulevards, from the slums of Petare to Plaza Bolivar, the historical heart of the nation. That night, Venezuelan history turned a new page not with ink on a diplomatic agreement, but with a grainy, chilling image resembling a criminal mugshot, a photograph of Nicolas Maduro, the man who once held ultimate power over life and death in the country. This paradox raises a haunting question. Why would a fiercely proud people, the heirs of Simón Bolívar, the liberator of South America, celebrate the arrest of their own president by the United States as if it were Independence Day? In the early morning hours, while much of the Western world was still asleep, U.S. President Donald Trump's Truth Social account suddenly posted a photograph that sent shockwaves across the globe. There was no lengthy statement, no formal press release, just a single image. In it stood Nicolas Maduro, a man long known for his tailored suits and thunderous anti-imperialist rhetoric on stage television. Now he was blindfolded, his hair disheveled, his hands cuffed behind his back, wearing a wrinkled tracksuit. Flanking him were U.S. Delta Force operators, faces hidden behind night vision gear and advanced equipment. The accompanying caption was brief and cold, like a gunshot. Nicolas Maduro is aboard a U.S. Navy vessel. Minutes later, Telegram and TikTok were flooded with leaked videos from the scene. The footage was shaky and blurred, yet clear enough to strip away all illusions and expose the raw reality of the regime's final moments. Venezuelans saw a completely different Nicolas Maduro, no longer the commanding supreme leader, no longer the invincible symbol carefully constructed by 13 years of propaganda. In the videos, he was dragged from a vehicle, his face pale with fear and confusion. Beside him was First Lady Celia Flores, once described as the Iron Lady behind the throne, now visibly trembling, her aura of power collapsing in real time. In just a few seconds, the regime's most potent weapon, fear, evaporated. People realized that the man who had forced them to silence for over a decade was in the end just a fragile human being before overwhelming force. The reaction exploded like a powder keg meeting flame, but instead of bullets, it was joy. A release of emotion compressed for years finally burst forth. At Plaza Bolivar in central Caracas, crowds climbed lampposts to tear down massive billboards bearing Maduro's image, looming symbols of surveillance and control. The sound of ripping canvas mixed with thunderous cheers. In Lara State, a bronze statue of Hugo Chavez, Maduro's predecessor and the spiritual icon of the Bolivarian Revolution, was pulled down with ropes amid euphoric shouting. In Petare, the largest slum in Latin America and once considered a stronghold of pro-government support, people flooded the streets like a torrent. Chants of Libertad and Libre Sal Fin echoed across the Caracas Valley, forming a symphony of liberation. A 60-year-old schoolteacher said through tears, "I've waited 10 years for this day. He stole my old age. He stole my children's future, but he couldn't steal tonight. We are free." The celebration spread worldwide. In Miami, the Doral district was completely gridlocked as thousands of Venezuelan exiles poured into the streets, waving flags, honking horns, embracing strangers. In Madrid, Puerta del Sol became a sea of yellow, blue, and red. A student named Elena sobbed as she spoke to reporters. "My mother just called from Maracaibo. She said the electricity is back, not the power grid, but the light of hope. I'm finally going home." To understand why Venezuelans rejoiced at their leader's arrest, the event cannot be viewed in isolation. The reaction was the inevitable result of 13 years of economic suffocation, institutional collapse, and systematic repression. When Nicolas Maduro took power in 2013, he inherited a country with the world's largest proven oil reserves, around 300 billion barrels. Venezuela was then the standard-bearer of the Latin American left, wealthy and influential. Yet within a decade, the economy lost nearly 80% of its value, the worst economic collapse in modern history for a country not at war. By 2018, inflation reached an almost unimaginable 1 million%. The bolivar became practically worthless. People carried cash in sacks to buy groceries. Street vendors wove handbags out of banknotes because the paper was worth more than the currency. At one point, the monthly minimum wage fell to just $2 or $3, barely enough to buy a carton of eggs. Economic collapse brought hunger, the disintegration of the healthcare system, and the largest refugee crisis in the Western Hemisphere. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans, almost a quarter of the population, fled their country. They didn't leave by plane, they walked. Images of migrants crossing the Darien Gap, the infamous jungle corridor between Colombia and Panama, testified to their desperation. They faced wild animals, criminal gangs, violence, and death simply to escape their homeland. Maduro's government was not only incompetent, but brutally repressive. Opposition leaders were jailed, placed under house arrest, or barred from running for office. United Nations reports accused security forces of carrying out thousands of extrajudicial killings. El Helicoide prison became a symbol of torture and terror. For many Venezuelans, therefore, Maduro's arrest by the United States was not an assault on sovereignty, but a hostage rescue, with the hostage being the Venezuelan nation itself. Yet the most controversial shock came with Trump's subsequent statement: the United States would directly administer Venezuela during a transitional period. It marked a dramatic shift in U.S. foreign policy, pragmatic but deeply fraught. The joy of today is real, but tomorrow's question looms large. Will a newly liberated Venezuela accept being governed by Americans? If liberation turns into a new form of colonial exploitation, today's celebration could quickly become tomorrow's resistance. Still, one fact is undeniable. January 5th, 2026 was the day Venezuela finally breathed again. Not because all problems were solved, but because the monster that had imprisoned the nation's dreams for 13 years was finally removed. The road ahead remains long and treacherous, but for the first time in over a decade, Venezuelans have reclaimed the right to dream of tomorrow. Thank you for watching this story. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video. And now it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for staying with Societal Stories.